transitional story?
Yeah, well, playing football was something that was very uh, unique. It was also something that was a great accomplishment to be able to play at the highest level that we could. Not only that, making a great friends, some friendships that I never expected to have that I did and I still have today. It's one of the great things about football, the camaraderie, the brotherhood. Um, football is something that teaches you how to band together and how to come together for a common goal. And on every Sunday, our common goal was to go and win a football game. Um, I'm from New York, so people typically when we played, they thought New York didn't have any great football players, or but New York is a pretty eclectic city, and you get to learn a lot about different types of people, and so I think that's what helped me, make it possible for me to have so many different friendships with different people from all walks of life. And playing football, I knew. I don't know if too many of us who think about this, but you know, one of the craziest things that I hear people say is that don't have a plan B, because then you're planning for your plan A to fail. But if you're intelligent and football doesn't last long, you have to have your plan B. So I worked on my plan A and plan B at the same time. I always knew that I wanted to teach, and I never thought about coaching. But once you become a teacher and people realize you play football, they want you to coach also. So I got into playing football. I'm sorry, coaching football in high school, and then it was uh, it was a way to stay connected to the game and keep my love for the game. So I started to hone my craft, and then along the way, I started getting involved in retired players' functions and events. I did a couple of internships for the NFL, and the combination of coaching, coaching took me to college, and the collegiate level took me to doing internships in the NFL, to currently working in the NFL. It it kind of my plan A kind of ended up being still current, because my plan B accidentally put me back into working in the field with my plan A. So um, that transition, at the time it was tough, because no player thinks they're ready to retire when they are. I know, you had your injury, and I had an injury. We had a couple of injuries, but at the time, sometimes you think you can still play through things, but life and reality sets in, and so you have to start to prepare your transition. So for me, um, just keeping steadfast with the idea of what I wanted to do, wanting to teach, and it, the things that I learned in football, like being accountable, um, being attentive, being someone who's driven, and someone who wants to complete your goal. It helped me to make that transition easier, because we never accepted no. We never took no as an answer. Or if we had that mentality, we've never made it to a level we made it to. So with those principles, I just took those principles and I applied that to what I was positioned for everything that I do, in regards to my life. Helped me create a structure. I was one as a young kid. I had rules and parameters, but I didn't have a specific type of structure that would help me uh, be as successful as I could as an adult. And football helped me with those principles and those ideals.
So, as a coach, what is something you want your players to take away from playing the game of football beyond the wins and losses? The grind of it, the practice of it, like you were saying, the structure. What do you want that dynamic group of guys to take from the game?
Well, one of the things that I tell guys, that I coach, I told them, one of the things you can do, you could always have a dream, but at the same time, you need to, um, let reality sit very close to your dream, because there are times when people can't handle the curve that life throws at you. That curveball, people can't seem to hit it. So, um, that dream sometimes it blurs the vision as to what you really can attain. So every kid that I played, that I coach, they wouldn't, they wouldn't have the athletic ability, or the physical the physical strength, or maybe even the understanding of the game completely, to where I knew that might not have been the right route for them. So I try to guide them, to tell them that I really don't coach you guys to do anything except for be good men. I wanted to prepare them someday for being good men, good fathers, and prepare, be able to prepare to take care of a family someday. So those are the things those were my principles as far as being a coach. It wasn't about um, you know being the best football player you could be. That was one of the things, but I wanted them to be the best human that they could be.
So thanks for joining us again this week, Ashley. Thanks so much for being here.
Yes, thanks for having me.
This week, we're talking about what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
And I know as athletes, part of our ethos is we want to give back.
Right.
But also part of our ethos is being very alpha, is we want to lead. And it's like we want to put our hands on the wheel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some athletes want to get to a point of saying, I want to start my own nonprofit. So when I'm thinking of knowledge versus wisdom, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of it is I'm volunteering to get the knowledge of
Absolutely.
What am I doing? What is this cause? What is it really about?
Right.
And by starting my nonprofit, the wisdom is putting that knowledge into action.
Absolutely. So when you think about obtaining the knowledge, right, to be in a position to be able to execute successfully, you have to think about where you've sown your time, right? Time is money. So when you think about it, so many are caught up on the dollar signs, and I don't want to volunteer because I'm not being paid, or I'm not, you get used to having the money in your pocket, right? But volunteering in the scope of nonprofit, that is exactly how you're earning your knowledge when you equate, not trying to get hung up on I'm not getting paid. You actually are. You're sewing into your level of being able to know exactly what you're going to be able to execute.
No, but I actually want you to kind of expand a little bit more about that, because unfortunately that is a characteristic of athletics. Did you actually overcome that objection to say, you know what, hey, even though we're not paying you, there might be something here worth your time?
Right. And that's important to understand that component there, because for example, when you're volunteering, you are able to see the behind the scenes work and the effort that goes into the impact that is wanting to be made. So when you have to put yourself aside for a minute and understand that in getting your feet wet, you will get those nuggets that you need to know exactly how to push those things forward when you're wanting to launch your own nonprofit. In volunteering, you're able to see literally when you talk about financials. You have to know, what it takes as far as wanting to start a nonprofit, for example, what it takes to actually keep it sustainable and keep it going. And I mentioned this in the last segment, that many try to be everything to everyone, and you lose sight of what your actual mission is. So when you don't have the concrete knowledge that you obtain through opportunities like volunteering in the community, volunteering or attaching yourself to the organizations that that light bulb that goes off every single time that you see what they got going. for example, when you think of like Boys and Girls Club, when you think of mentorship, when you think of moving past hurdles that you didn't see arising, when you're a part of that work and you're a part of that influence, it connects and it kind of just gives you the butterflies inside, because you're like, I really like being a part of that. But those are experiences that are obtained through volunteerism, right? Because if you think of any other opportunities, how would you really be able to get to know the deep down and dirty without going through it, right? So that to answer your question, when you have to think of how things equate, when you are sowing your time, you're actually getting knowledge that is then going to make you the money, right? Down the line.
Yeah.
Right? And just knowing that there are several pieces to the bigger puzzle, and understanding what each arm of that is, that's what's going to help build the knowledge to say, you know what, I actually will feel fully supported in knowing that I know what I'm doing. Because a lot of like, and I see it happen a lot, is a lot of athletes will say, okay, I want to start a foundation. Right. Is it just because everybody else is doing it? Or do you have a cause or a mission or somebody's backyard that you want to become attached to actually be able to sow your seed in allowing it to grow?
I'm thinking I could read a book about gumbo.
Right.
And then I could take the top off the pot and get a spoonful
and taste
taste some gumbo. It's like reading about it is the knowledge. Yes. Opening that pot and
stirring those ingredients.
Yeah. That's wisdom. Because you're like, very good. Yeah.
And then in that experience, you take what you know needs to be added, right?
Or taken away.
Or take away, right? Where I'm all about seasoning. I love tasting good food. But then when I'm like, ooh, that has a little bit too much of that. Or it needs a little bit more of this. That's how you're able to equate the two and build your own experience.
So again, we always appreciate your time helping us. Just that engaging the community is how we actually transform our knowledge into wisdom.
Yes.
Because we're seeing what we're learning about in action.
Exactly.
And that's what living, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And it's so important. It's so important to create your own experience, because when you're going through and you're trying to learn more about something that you don't know, but then being able to take what you learn and put your spin on it, it's really amazing.
So we're back with Harold. Harold, thanks so much for being with us this week.
Thank you for having me, man.
So as we've been talking about, we're really trying to understand what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. We might have the knowledge of fitness, but we really don't have the wisdom of personal training. So how can you help an athlete realize what they don't know?
When it comes to training, basically it's one of those things. If the athlete has been training all his life, he's always been told what to do. Once you're done training, you're not an athlete no more. Now you're a regular citizen. So now it's not more about training to be a better athlete. Now it's training to live longer in your life. So certain exercises that you would do, for example, great exercise, power clean and press. You have no reason to do that no more. There's no need for you to do that as a regular person, because now it's more about you want to look lean, keep the fat off, and just live a normal life. All the power clean and press at the age you are now after you finish playing is one of the things where, now you putting yourself towards injury, because you're not going out there anymore and just giving 100% on the field or on the court, wherever sport you're playing. It's more like I'm working out now to take care of my body, more of the inside versus the outside. Because like I said before in the episode before, a lot of us athletes, we work out to get stronger, faster, and bigger, and it's mostly shown on the outside. We're not really taking care of ourselves on the inside. But it's not till we finish playing that you have to reverse everything. Be like, let me take care of myself more on the inside, because that's what's going to sustain me for a longer, better life. And you're not looking to be bigger, stronger, or faster. You're just looking to be healthy more than anything else.
It took a team, right, to get us to where we were.
Right.
Besides a personal trainer, are there any other professions or professionals that could be incorporated into that new ecosystem to help create that new path in that person's life?
Definitely, yes. So, a personal trainer and a chef go hand in hand. You know, another thing as an athlete, you know, we're always told what to eat or not to eat, even though sometimes you listen, sometimes you don't. But the biggest thing with that, and we've talked about this before, the fact that when you were an athlete, calories was not something on your mind as far as how many calories you put in your body, because you know you're going to burn it because you're working out 4 or 5 hours a day. But now when you become a regular Joe Blow, you know, you have an everyday job, you can't eat that much calories anymore. So now you still want that chef, but the chef would not be cooking the same meals that you were doing when you were playing. The meals are more condensed. You know, they're more lean for you to where, you know, you can keep the fat off of you and keep the muscle tone going for the workouts you're doing now and the food that you're eating, and to give you energy throughout the day. Because most athletes, they have energy throughout the day only because they're working out 4 or 5 hours a day. It could be 2 hours in the morning, 2 to 3 hours in the morning, 2 or 3 hours in the evening. But in between that time, you're still burning calories and you still have this energy and this pump because you know you're going to end up working out again. So you have energy all day, every day. But now as a regular citizen, just, you know, going from a 9 to 5, you don't have that luxury anymore. Now it's like, no, get up in the morning, get my workout, and then go to work. And one of those things when you go to work, you know, you might hit that midday snooze, like, dang, I'm tired. But at the same time, you're going to start eating better to where you'll be able to fuel your body with the right foods. And that's when the chef comes in, fueling your body with the right foods. And then you're able to sustain energy throughout the day. And then you'll wake up in the morning and do it all over again.
So what's the difference between a chef and a nutritionist?
The nutritionist is really going to tell you what you can eat. The chef is just going to cook the food for you. At the end of the day, the chef.
Okay, yeah.
One's the menu, one's the plate. Tell you what you want. Yeah. So I mean, the chef just tells you what you want, but at the same time, you could be like, so big. If you were my chef, I'm like, you know, I'd be like, Ainsley, I want this, and that, and I don't want you to put this, and that in it. I want it to be, you know, nice and lean. Don't put all that extra stuff in it to give it flavor, but still want it to be good. And the chef will know how to do it. So that's where the chef comes in more so. But you'll mostly get a lot of your stuff from a nutritionist to help you out with, and the chef will be able to put it together for you.
So in closing, for the athlete that has the trainer, the nutritionist, has that team around them, what's a question they could ask themselves to decide whether it's time for them to do it for themselves or to keep and just kind of say, you know what, this team that I have is such an investment in what I'm doing. It's better for me just to keep them on board.
I would ask yourself 2 questions. 1, time, and 1, are you willing to do it? If you have the time to do it, then by all means, actually, you know what? They go hand in hand. If you have the time to do it, then by all means, you can let the chef and nutritionist go. But then you have to decide, am I going to do it and do I want to do it? So I feel like those 2 go hand in hand. If you want your food fresh, every day keep them fresh, then you definitely got to keep the chef, without a doubt. Because at the end of the day, if you don't feel like cooking, you got to eat. But if you don't feel like cooking, your nutrition will go definitely down. So That's one of the biggest things. So I feel like the biggest thing is time, and are you willing to invest the time into cooking for yourself?
We're here with Brooke Malone. Thank you so much for being with us this week.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Mm-hmm. So I guess let's start from your point of view. How would you help somebody understand what is the difference between having knowledge and having wisdom?
Yeah, so I think it's first important to know that they are both necessary and powerful. Knowledge, to me, is just the start of establishing wisdom. So you gain knowledge by, of course, learning new things, understanding something that you haven't learned before about a specific topic, a specific person, an area that you need to grow and learn more in. Wisdom comes where you know how and when to apply the knowledge that you have. So I was just recently sharing with you, Ainsley, that, on a call recently, we were talking about how knowledge is important, but knowledge is not power to a certain extent. Like it is, like knowledge is valuable. Absolutely. We all know that education is a great facilitator that helps break so many barriers. But the understanding of something can only get you so far if you don't know how and when to apply that knowledge. So wisdom comes along. I think it becomes, to a certain point, once you have so much knowledge, it also comes from experience and it becomes intrinsic to you and instinctive. So you know when to apply that knowledge in certain areas.
Is it safe to say initially when we meet people, you're getting knowledge about them? And over time, that knowledge turns into wisdom? Or I guess over time, how can I turn my knowledge of people into wisdom about them?
Yeah, so I think knowledge and wisdom about people can come through multiple experiences. So you can actually have experiences with another person or group of people and apply that to someone new based on like the personality traits that you see, their body language, the type of words they use when they speak, how they present themselves. So you can take all of that experience because, again, a piece of wisdom is knowledge is a piece of wisdom, right? But the experience and other things that come along with time can give you wisdom. So I would say that knowledge about someone comes through, of course, learning about them through maybe other sources, through referrals, through Google, because we know everything is Googleable right now. Wisdom about that person can come through even previous experiences that you had, but also more time that you spend with them.
As athletes are getting to know people and people are getting to know the athletes, what are
Yeah.
things both can do to gain more knowledge about one another?
Be genuinely inquisitive. Like, just really be curious about the other person. Like, what are they up to? What are some of the goals they have? What are their past experiences? Something I love watching is interviews. I love watching interviews from, business professionals, personal interviews, like couples, politicians. Like, I love watching interviews. And the best interviewers and even the best people who you think have good relationships in the industry and even outside are people who like walk in with an authentic curiosity, like really wanting to know more about the other person. And not only learning more so you can see how you can benefit yourself, but like really get those wheels turning of like, how can I pour into this person? But to start with that on both ends is just to be open. Like, we all have heard this before, like you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So just listen to the other person and see what's going on with them and how you guys can help one another.
Because you've brought curiosity up a couple of times and actually a couple of different situations from gaining clarity, from understanding purpose, but now it's using the same curiosity with turning your knowledge into wisdom. So
Absolutely.
I kind of speak a little bit on the curiosity, because that's a very interesting concept related to really everything in life.
It is. So when you're curious, to me, curiosity is like a desire to want to learn more. Anyone who knows me, like, I think you may know this about me, Battles, like I am pretty naturally inquisitive. Like, I want to learn more, like why, how, when, where did that happen? How does this occur? And that's because I usually am pretty interested in knowing those things. So the way you're able to get further is by putting aside what you know or what you think you know and just being open to learning more. And to me, that's what curiosity is. Curiosity is leaving yourself open to take in more information. And you have the option to decide what you want to do with that information. You can take it in, you can reject it, but just be curious. And to me, curiosity means being open to learning new and more things.
What would you say to the person that is afraid. They're just afraid to open up. They're afraid to reveal who they are, or at least who they are right now, because we're always works in progress. I guess to put the fear down and kind of just be curious, because in our heads we're kind of binary. I'm either for it or against it, and it's like curiosity is suspended animation. You're sitting in the middle, like, I don't know yet.
Right.
How do you get that person kind of there?
Yeah, so I would say to address dropping fear, always remember everyone's human. Like, I'm human just like you. And I hate to be what may sound elementary, but like, if you cut any of us, we're all going to bleed red. We're all going to, bleed red. And just remember that even if this person rejects you, whatever you deem as rejection, you're going to have another opportunity to go after someone else, to learn something new about someone else. So just remember, just keeping in mind your end goal and thinking to yourself, like, is this fear worth more than what my end goal is? And if it's not, then go for it.
So we're here again with Courtney Grimes. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So today we are talking about what is the difference between knowledge and wisdom?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a great question. I think that that's something that we need to start addressing globally, but especially within the world of sports. Knowledge, at least for me, is a list or a book or a packet of things that I have been told, things that I have been taught, individual pieces of information I've picked up along the way. Wisdom is my ability to culminate all of these individual pieces of knowledge to create a pattern, to read into the future a little bit, to create and predict what may or may not happen, and be able to create and make a play based on the arc of the experience and not just one or two pieces of information or knowledge, if that makes sense.
It does. We kind of think of words like smart, educated, but we kind of understand too, there's a limitation, because life isn't learned reading a book. You don't learn football reading a book. You learn it by going out and playing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even just to speak to that, with a clinical education, you are taught all about neuropathology, you're taught how the brain works, you're taught how people work. But until you sit in a room with a human life on a sofa in front of you, you have no clue. All of a sudden, you have to start using your wisdom and not just your knowledge from your education. So that's a very good point. And I would imagine too, that happens with athletes, right? On and off the field. They've got what they learned from their coach. They've got what they've learned as the plays for the game. But then there's that instinct. There is that knowledge there, coupled with the wisdom and experience of the game. So you look at a quarterback who's been in the game for 10 years and a quarterback that's been in the game for 6 months, they're probably going to be apt to make different plays because they have different levels of experience and different knowledge, a different combination of information and knowledge that they've got over their career.
So where would you say the limitations of knowledge are? Kind of, where is that line of demarcation where there's only so much, the book has to end. Eventually you're going to be done with the book, but the book couldn't capture everything. And I think this is probably the greatest space in an athlete's transition. I think initially, and obviously over time, but definitely initially, because that first step is very important. How do I know kind of what I know versus there's going to be more to this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. Even when I created my treatment center business model, there is nothing happening like this in mental and behavioral healthcare at all in this country. And so when I created this platform, it's based on community and social connection as a healing mechanism for depression and anxiety. It's working. It's working. So the demarcation for me in this field, as an example, would be the knowledge creating this platform. Now the knowledge I had, right, to create this platform was, one, Courtney, this is a very volatile market right now. Two, it's high risk to start a new platform, a new idea, a new business, as millions of people are losing their jobs. They don't have money to pay for treatment. Three, health insurance is not really known for being able to cover mental and behavioral health care. But four, I also knew that through the platform of the internet, through platforms like Facebook and Instagram, all of our social media, which is designed to really bring us together. What I know, what research tells us, is that people are lonelier now more than ever. And depression and anxiety rates are higher now than they've ever been. So I'm watching these pieces of information roll in and the data roll in, and I'm thinking, okay, my experience, right? Like my wisdom tells me, my instinct tells me that people need people. I'm going to create this platform for behavioral health care, mental health care. I'm going to trust my instinct because I know myself and I know the human experience. And I know that at the end of the day, we're all the same. So even though the knowledge tells me don't do this, my wisdom says this is the perfect time and we need this more than ever. So I would say the line between knowledge and wisdom for a lot of us is going to be the intuitive part, listening to ourselves, trusting our experience, trusting our intelligence to bring us through pieces that might be blind spots, right? Like we know what we know, but it's also really important to understand what we don't know. And always be open to knowing what your blind spots are and obtaining more and more knowledge to create greater wisdom.
So one thing that we want to do with the show is expand people's vocabulary, because the more words you know, the more thoughts you can have, and it opens up the world.
Sure.
So one thing that's going to be inevitable as you go through this new phase of life, your knowledge turning into wisdom, is going to be cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I would say cognitive dissonance is when you have two conflicting ideas that come together and you have to reconcile that. Mm-hmm. For instance, it would be, should you lie? Is lying wrong? Yes, lying is wrong. Okay. If you and your wife are in an alley and a robber jumps out and he asks, hey, is anybody else out here? Should you lie? Yes. So what is wrong? No. So it's when you take that and you put it head on, then you start to say, wait a second, it's not as black and white. It's not as easily defined or binary as our brains might want to trick us into thinking. Mm-hmm. So for athletes, how do you kind of coach them through don't do anything and learn how to allow time to work?
Good question. Most of them, I work with a lot of people on what we call mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is sometimes used to talk about meditation or self-care, things like that. The mindfulness, which is very important, the mindfulness that I'm talking about, especially with athletes, it's being mindful of mindless patterns, really being intentional about how you kind of just move through the motions in your life. A lot of these guys, years after they're off the field, they're in the same patterns that they've been in for years and years and years, but those patterns, the way that they think, the way that they react to situations, the way that they do relationship, the way that they approach finances, et cetera, it doesn't work anymore. They've evolved past old places where they need to adapt. They need to be resilient and use their skill set to adapt to these new circumstances, right? Well, it's hard to do that if you're not paying attention. It's hard to do that if you are sort of mindlessly going through the same motions that you've always gone through, yet staying really frustrated that nothing is changing or nothing feels better for you, right? So for a lot of athletes, especially, mindfulness is really, really important in creating sustainable change. Now, in terms of adaptation, I'm not really convinced that any of us can adapt to 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 versions of ourselves without really backing up, as you said, and examining, just kind of slowing down and examining the way that we think. Getting a little, it's what we call metacognitive, which is the ability to think about your thinking. And we're the only animal that can do that, right? But really being able to slow down, pay attention to how you think, patterns that show up, patterns that we react to our environment and to other people, patterns of reacting to stories in our head about the future, and being able to really kind of take a step back and be more in control, learn how to be more in control of our mind instead of our mind being in control of us. And I think that mindfulness piece, that intuition, that really being able to back up and kind of know yourself and know your patterns and know how to adjust and tweak things whenever you need to, is key to surviving what's next for folks after they are off the field.
So is it safe to say that knowledge is an accumulation of what we're taught or what we know? Wisdom is the actual action of that knowledge that you have?
Yes, that's a great way to say it. I would say knowledge is probably like a list of different pieces of information that you've kind of accumulated, right, over your life. And wisdom is the ability to put it all together and make it work together and filter out what doesn't work anymore, and then be able to make a play.
Perfect. So for athletes, or for really anybody that feels like they do have, they say, okay, I'm at least aware of where I want to go and where I'm at, and I kind of struggle putting that game plan together, or even thinking, being able to think clearly about what I'm doing. As a psychologist, what roles does your profession play in helping that individual or individuals kind of map that new trajectory?
I love it. Okay, so I use what's called the trifecta. I call it the trifecta of psych. I love it. These are the 3 best interventions ever. And really, really good therapists can kind of mix and match some of these interventions to sort of tweak the brain and retrain it to work a little better for you. The first one is called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is it's the idea that human thought creates an emotional reaction, and that emotional reaction dictates how someone's going to behave, what they're going to do about it, right? And so it goes thought, emotional reaction, behavior. Now we all try to get in there and change our behavior, or we all are trying to, in my humble opinion, we pay way too much attention to how we feel. And I think that feelings are great and important, but really that's not where it stops. We need to back up and examine the stories in our head that are dictating the feelings in the first place. That is an awesome intervention. In order to do that, it takes a lot of mindfulness. You got to sit back and be like, what do I think about? What are these thoughts? What's making me feel so scared or angry or lonely or sad? And then be able to tweak some of the thoughts to be a little more true, and using wisdom to make those thoughts a little more true, to produce a whole different gamut of emotion, usually peace and contentment, right? Which then produce a whole different set of behaviors. So CBT is what we call that. Cognitive behavioral therapy is very, very important. A second modality that I will pull from is called dialectic behavioral therapy, or DBT. Now, that is a very skills-based intervention. And the 2 things that I love to pull, the 2 skill sets that I love to pull from that intervention, is the first one's called distress tolerance. When we feel scared, when we feel unsure, when we feel like we have no idea what's about to happen, we're kind of freaked out, or we're really angry, or really anxious, or really scared, or really sad, being able to sit in that energy and kind of tolerate it and let it pass without acting to move it or fix it or fade it or hide it. It's just a feeling. It's just energy. It will pass. And teaching folks how to do that is so, so gratifying. It's so, so cool. The other piece that I'd love to pull from DBT is what we call emotion regulation, right? So if you have a thought that triggers an emotion, that emotion can sort of get tentacles and start to spiral out into other emotions, right? So say I have a thought and it says, my thought tells me, Courtney, tomorrow I think something really bad might happen to you. Well, the initial reaction I'm going to have. I'm going to be really, really scared. I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen to me tomorrow? And then another emotion I could feel, like I'm really angry that I can't control tomorrow. And then another emotion I could feel could be self-doubt. Like I don't think I could handle it. So all of these other emotions could start to ping pong around, right? And teaching people how to just kind of calm down, tolerate it, regulate it. You're gonna be okay. It's just a feeling. It doesn't mean anything, and let it pass. That's the second really big intervention that I'll pull from. And the third one is probably my favorite. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT. And it teaches folks how to really step back and realign their behavior and their thoughts with their value system. And that's really, really important, because I think a lot of us grow up having values dictated to us. This is what's important. It's family. This is what's important. It's winning. This is what's important. It's money, right? And so we grow up having these value systems sort of like told to us. But at the end of the day, nobody can tell you what's important to you. I can't tell somebody what's valuable to them. It either is or it isn't. But it's really cool when people can give themselves permission to sort of re-examine some of that. Is that stuff really important to me? I don't act like it is. And then I beat the crap out of myself because I'm not making decisions that instate these values, but really, I really don't know if that's important to me. And being able to always adapt to an evolving value system. And all of this takes a lot of wisdom and not just independent pieces of knowledge. Do you see how it's all kind of connected?
What I'm really blown away with, and I'm speaking now more as just a Black male, a Black American, psychology and sitting with professionals to go through mental health, culturally speaking, it is still to a degree taboo.
Yeah.
One, because you say, okay, as a white woman, how in the world could you ever understand where I'm coming from? As a man, right? The own ethos of men don't cry, X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely.
What I'm hearing, and it's been a consistent thing, is what the individual is going through is unique to them, but it's not unique in and of itself.
Right.
Would that be? So if that's the case, then if I walk in with whatever my gambit is, not whatever it is, from a psychological standpoint, because one, if you're listening to this and you're a retired NFL player, we get a certain number of free sessions through our union, and so this is a great plug. And if you're a professional athlete, period, and your union provides this free of charge, I'm amazed by how much sitting in that chair that person can actually do for you. And it is kind of knowing ahead of time, yeah, you are, pardon the French, like you're freaking the fuck out. But like you said, it's an emotion that's okay. But we don't ever go through the emotion. We always want to stop it. Or take charge of it. I don't have to guess. There are people who are trained to say, the issue is not even the emotion you're having, it's the story behind the emotion that you're feeling that let's get to address. And that's something for me, that's an aha moment.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, I love that we're talking about this. And it's so fascinating because every client that I work with has their own unique background, their own unique details, their own unique story, right? But at the end of the day, the human brain is the human brain. It's so cool to meet all of these different people who are sometimes exactly like me in background, and some could not be more different. And it's so neat because everybody is their own little unique combination of puzzle pieces. And it's my job to figure out those unique pieces and how they fit together. And Ainsley, your pieces might overlap some with mine, and you might have some other different pieces, but all the pieces that are available to both you and me are all the same. But our combination of the puzzle pieces are going to be a little bit different. But at the end of the day, right, we're all working with the same options for pieces.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much again for just really helping us understand the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Kind of the things that influence one another, and also the role of psychologists, of professionals, clinical professionals that can really help navigate people through those murky waters. So again, Courtney, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you everybody for joining us this week for Joccupation. Join us next week when we'll be discussing the difference between being rich and being wealthy. And now your motivational speech.
So Takia Butler, 7 names. So that's the first thing I like for people to know about me. So Takia Akua Chanel Shante Ahura Nasia Denal Taj Butler. So that's my full name. I say it that way because what I do for a living is help communities, organizations, and individuals figure out how to deal with change, especially around really complex issues or problems. So on the community level, right now, I'm helping my hometown actually to figure out ways to reduce poverty and increase economic well-being, and then trying to do that in the midst of a pandemic. For organizations, it might look like, it's been 3 or 5 years, we have the strategic plan, we need to figure out kind of what our next steps are. And often for individuals, it's, hey, I've experienced some degree of failure. How do I kind of snap back from that? How do I get back on track? So a lot of what I do for a living is really actually helping people deal with failure, but figuring out how to do that in a way that's less about worrying about anything outside of themselves, and really starting with the interpersonal work that's necessary, that kind of self-identification of what are my processes, in what ways could I possibly make some changes within myself first before I try and impress changes on the world. That's very much informed by a background in track and field.
That's supernatural. Mm-hmm. But as athletes, we experience it, but can you recreate it in a different arena?
I think that you can. So, but what I'll also admit is that right before this call, I went and took a 30-minute bike ride. And part of that bike ride on the way back, because I hadn't ridden in a while because it's gotten a little cold. I know you don't have the same problems about coldness where you are, but
it's relative.
As I'm riding, there was a moment where I leaned forward on my bike and I pressed really, really hard, and I was listening to Tap In. And I kept telling myself, like, Tia, tap in, tap in, tap in. So sometimes I still use sports and exercise to do that work of digging deep and finding, because I think to your point, there's mind, body, and spirit, and all those things need to be in alignment. All those things need to be healthy. So I don't think that I want to easily copy and paste some of the things that you get from physical exertion, because I think your body needs to be in some degree of, your body needs to be as tapped in to whatever work you do post-sports. Your body needs to be just as tapped in. And I use my body often as a means of training myself to be more resilient. But to your point of figuring out how to persevere, figuring out how to push through, figuring out how to pull things together on the rougher days, that I think is more to your point, how do you connect to some things that are a little bit higher? What are your ethos? But it really is a culture shift and about habit change. Because one of the things that sports gives you is all these places and spaces to reinforce certain habits, right? If I don't eat a certain way, if I don't practice a certain way, if I don't move the ball a certain way or use my legs or get out of the blocks a certain way, then I'm going to experience failure in this situation. And so I have to practice certain habits before, during, and after a sports performance in order to produce the things that I need to produce. In the world of non-sports, you still do have to have certain habits to be able to produce certain behaviors. But to your point, it's all operating under a culture that has certain expectations. And so I think often you use the word ethos and it immediately made me think of ego. A lot of the work and the nature of the work that I know that I do, or that I try to support folks through, is often very ego and self-based, when it should be a lot more we and communal based. That is an assumption that I think exists in sports as an athlete that does not always translate into these other spaces. And so beyond just the habits that you need to form, it's like, who are you doing the work for? Are you doing the work just for yourself to get to produce and to feel good and to feel accomplished? Or are you actually doing it to impact and to benefit something bigger than yourself? If you believe that it's for something bigger than yourself, if that's the ethos that you're operating under, then you have to tap into a whole different part of yourself. You have to tap into a whole different set of habits, a whole different set of things, because it's not about you anymore. And so I think that maybe is some of what can be taken from sports, is that it is more we than maybe some folks really do understand. Even when you're playing tennis or running track, sports that seem so individual, they're still we based, even if other folks don't understand them that way. So I think the culture in which you do the work is the thing that needs to transfer, as well as the understanding that sports is really a sports performance is an accumulation of good habits.